As people, as creators, we'd like to make progress. We like to understand that the things we are doing are bringing about results. Have we written today? Did we sketch out the image that we thought about last night when we got out of bed this morning and went to our desk? How many circuits of the park have we walked? What came in today to your bank account in terms of dividends or investment payback? Who has signed up for your online course? A small advance is still forward progress, and it might only be 5% in the right direction, but that's 5% more than last week or 5% more than a month ago. As I finished January and I looked back on that quarter for November, December and the month of January, I realized that what I needed to do was wrap up and finish some of the projects that I'd been working on in those previous 3 months so that I can see stepping into March as a positive place to be, having achieved completion on lots of those projects. What is it that you want to track in terms of your creative output and the efforts that you're investing your time into so that you can see a better result? What aspect of your creative activity would it really serve you to start measuring so that maybe next month and the quarter that is ahead of us, you can make better decisions and use your time perhaps in a different way for results that you become very proud of? I find myself focusing on my daily word count, but also looking back at a given week and thinking, was I happy with the way that the words came together? Did I capture the mood of the story or the idea that I was writing about? And how did that activity and that time invested in creating fresh words compare perhaps to what I did the month before? As an investor and a saver, I will look with a calculator once a week at what's happened to the funds that we've set aside as a family for future use. But much like in my writing role, I will look at the stock portfolio in a given week just once, and then I'll compare it to what happened in each of the weeks of the previous month. In a different process, my wife and I will look each month at the comments that we get from guests staying in our accommodation so that we can think, are we missing out on the way we are dressing or decorating the rooms? Is there something that we can do in terms of hosting or perhaps providing the local tours for the area where we live? And do that in a different way or a better way, more importantly, than what we offered and what we shared with guests the previous month. Why is it important to track things? You can take the information that you've noted in your daily jottings or your weekly summary, and you can think, how do I use that information so that it matches tightly with my own personal goals and the projects that I'm working on, so that you can either do better in the same timetable that you've already identified, you can shorten the timetable and get those results faster and sooner. Say, for example, you want to write an 80,000 word story. You're only available on perhaps, let's say, 4 occasions a week. You can manage 1,000 words in each of those sessions, whether at the kitchen table or out at the coffee shop, so that you know you can write 4 times in a week, 1,000 words each time. You've now got a 20-week time frame to take you to that new book that you want to create. Let's go back to the idea of savings. If you've got a goal to pop in $10,000 into your savings account, the timescale is really important because you want to get that money working for you as soon as possible. If the goal is $10,000 and you can put aside $250 in each pay period or from each paycheck, whether you get paid weekly or monthly, the formula is still the same. You have 40 contributions to make at $250 a time to achieve your $10,000 in that savings pot or that emergency fund to protect you from some of the things that may go wrong or some of the vagaries of the expenses that occur to us on a regular basis. But you know that you have a 40 payment process to reach your target. Previously, it was just a big number and you weren't sure how you would get there or how long it might take. By breaking down your long-term objective into smaller bite-sized chunks or pieces of activity, This makes the goal seem much closer, less distant, and far more achievable. Tracking word count, savings, investments, these are just small portions of the things that we can monitor and learn from as we look at the numbers and the data that it gives back to us. How about your time used in the course of a week? Hours that you allocate to an important project? How often do you meet up with friends socially, and how good do you feel by having put this in your diary? Looking again at the example of some of my writing activity and tracking the numbers and the patterns that I was observing was hugely helpful to me a few weeks ago, and I'll share what I discovered. If I look here at my December writing goals, it was interesting. After November, I had a week's break, so I didn't start writing until the 8th of December. But I can see from tracking my basic notes that I worked on several different projects. So, for example, I worked on the book called Meaningful Work. I worked on the Nottinghamshire detective series for several days. I worked again on a book called 10-Minute Investor, back to the Southwell detective story, 10-Minute Investor, a book called Frugal Living. How did tracking help me in this situation? I set myself what I thought was an achievable goal of writing for just over half of the days in the month and managing 500 words. By being flexible with word count, I actually achieved over 22,000 words, almost 3 times my original target for the month. In January, I decided to track a different approach to my writing, and instead of using my MacBook Air, I switched to my Alpha Smart Neo. Let's have a look at how I got on with that. These are the writing sessions in this column, and on the right-hand side, my word count for the month of January. So I wrote at home, 800 words, 955. I went to a coffee shop, and my word count doubled. I have no idea why, but there must be something about the relaxation I feel when I'm in that white noise of a high street and there are people and there's traffic going by. Maybe it's the fact that I'm out and about and I'm paying to enjoy that coffee. But look at the word counts when I'm in a coffee shop. 1,400, 2,500, 1,300. In January, I wrote for 1 extra writing session. So in December, you remember, I managed 16 days. In January, it was 17 days, 5 at home, 12 out and about in different coffee shops. And that was great in and of itself. I achieved almost 29,000 words, so I was more productive by the sake of 6,000 or 7,000 words than the previous month. As a bit of a joke, I also thought I'd have a look at my actual cost per 1,000 words. This is what I spent on coffee and cakes or coffee and sandwiches out and about during the course of those writing sessions when I left the house. The total was 815 pesos, just under £38. If I spent £38 in the course of a month to write in coffee shops and I achieved just under 29,000 words, my average cost is £1.30. I guess that might be about $1.50. £1.30 per 1,000 words. This is me thinking aloud, but if you wanted to create an 80,000 word story at a cost of £1.30 on tea and coffee and cakes per 1,000 words, it's going to cost you just over £100 to complete that first draft 80,000 word manuscript. The magical thing about pulling information and numbers and data from your diaries and your notebooks is that this allows you to make decisions for the month ahead, where we go back to that idea that you might be 4 or 5 or 6% better at the things that you're doing. Here I'm using the example of finance in that life role as a saver and an investor. And I'm just looking here at our savings portfolio. I've got 9 categories of stock that we're invested in. So banks and retail, investment funds, telecoms, tech, pharma, energy, shipping, and property or real estate. And then I've looked at the percentage that we have allocated to each area. But our strongest positions are in the areas where I've got the greatest confidence. All that's happening here is I'm looking at tracking patterns And in this case, it happens to be savings and investment activity. Over the course of this month, I'm back to reading about folklore, fairy tales, and stories of intrigue and mystery and things that go bump in the night in rural areas. So Household Stories by the Brothers Grimm is a part of my February reading. So I've been adding notes and comments to some of the aspects of the stories that I've been reading over the course of this month. So that's the Household Stories by the Brothers Grimm. The Alan Garner book, The Weirdstone of Brisingamen, ties in quite nicely with that for his writing about the adventures of some children in a rural area just outside Manchester in the north of England, and I'm really enjoying it. I read it when I was a teenager, but reading it again now for what I think is the third, possibly the fourth time, is bringing back good memories, but also it's helping me with the ideas of a story that I'm setting in Nottinghamshire. And another book that's helping is the rereading of this book, The Old Ways. It's by an English author called Robert Macfarlane, and it includes a lot of essays in this book. Some of them deal with the old footpaths and the journeys that I've made across England in very isolated, remote areas, wooded country, high country on chalk downlands. And it's great just to be going back into those stories that capture me and draw my attention because of the experience I've had in some of those rural areas. These three will get logged in my diary so that I can track my time spent reading, the number of occasions during the month that I managed to read, and my feelings, thoughts, and my perspectives on the information that I gather and am able to take from these books, and think, how might I include some of the style elements or specific story types and use those in my writing as we go into March. Those are just some of the themes and ideas that I've been tracking in the last few weeks, looking at my progress with my word count, looking at the way that savings and investments are performing or not performing, considering how our bed and breakfast offering is benefiting the clients as well as generating revenue for our household. All of this information you can extract from those notebooks for the idea that your creativity, your progress, your savings activity, your offerings can be 5% better this month than they were last month. And because you're looking at things that are important to you, because you're tracking the things that matter most, you'll find it easy to generate the energy and the enthusiasm for delving into the data that will make your life just that 5% better as we move into the next month.